We ready? Good morning. I hope everybody had a nice Christmas. Enjoyed their family and the Christmas day. Leighton, would you lead us in a word of prayer, please? The beginning of, I don't know if it was in the leader's book or in the student book, that talked about the fact that at Christmas time, everybody's got their nativities out, and we talk about Jesus a lot and the manger story and read the scripture from it. But then some people, when Christmas time comes, packs up their Christmas and it packs up Jesus with it, and they just go back to everyday living. But this lesson is the King who reigns forever, and the point is that Jesus rules his kingdom now and forever. So we can pack up all the Christmas goods, but we can't pack up Jesus, because he is the ruler forever and ever. It's our two passages both deal with messages about the future birth of the same child. In the 8th century BC, God called the prophet Isaiah to deliver a message of hope that included the reign of a unique unique kind of king. More than 700 years later, God sent the angel Gabriel to a young woman to tell her that she would give birth to a unique child who would reign as king forever. When God had stopped David from building the temple, he made a promise to David that one of his heirs would sit on his throne forever. And when he made that promise, he wasn't making a promise that it would be his sons always would be the ones that sat on that throne, but that he would have an heir that had a forever kingdom. About 740 BC, God called Isaiah to announce his coming judgment on Judah. God also told Isaiah to include in his prophecies the coming destruction, a vision of hope and restoration. So that's what we studied 2 weeks ago, was where he told about how it was going to be destroyed and overtaken Israel, the land, and that they would be a nation called the nation of Galilee, and it would be mostly Gentiles. Galilee of the Gentiles, that's what it was. It would be mostly of the Gentiles. And so, but he also at that time gave a vision of hope and restoration. Isaiah 9:1-7 is another of those pictures of hope and a reminder of God's faithfulness to his covenant with David that would never end. Chapter 9 begins with the prophecy about a great light that would one day appear in the region of Galilee. Isaiah went on to describe how God would bless the people with joy and freedom from their oppressors and establish a new kingdom that would be ruled by a new kind of king. Isaiah 9:6-7. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. So basically this is Isaiah prophesying about the coming of the King who reigns forever, which would be Jesus. And it says the government shall be upon his shoulders. This is the image of a king literally putting on his royal robes. the clothing that represents who he is and the authority he has. So, as the ruler of a government, a human man would be in priestly robes, in kingly robes and his garment. And this, when it talked about it should be upon his shoulders, it was literally saying that Jesus will wear the robe of a king, that he will be the king of this kingdom, this domain forever and ever. And it says, wonderful. The Hebrew word refers to that which is supernatural and miraculous. This is the same root word for the miracles that occurred in Egypt. So, supernatural and miraculous, and we know that only comes from God. Counselor. This counselor would speak advice and counsel that was extremely wise. Putting wonderful alongside counselor points to a ruler who would express God's wisdom in all his words and actions. So, I like the part where it says that he would speak advice and give counsel. And God always tells us what to do and the right thing to do, even when we don't do it. We don't always follow it, but he always counsels us in the right way to go. And being a wonderful counselor means that he has the power of God behind him, the authority of God behind him, because he is God, fully man, fully God, and that he would speak to us and give us the godly counsel, the godly wisdom that we need. Mighty God. The primary significance of mighty God is to clarify the deity of this leader. These two words are a common title for God in the Old Testament. While this child and son will be fully human, he will also be fully God, because he will be God. His power and might will be limitless. So as creator, mighty God, he would constantly have and continually have all the power, all the glory, all the might that's needed. He, under his rule, will need no other power. It says he will be the divine warrior who fights for his people. I love that, because there's a verse of scripture in the New Testament that talks about that Jesus ever lives. I think I'm quoting it pretty close. Ever lives. Well, I lost it. What does Jesus ever live to do? Make intercession for us. That he ever lives to come before the Lord, before God, and say, that's one of mine. I know she's messed up, but she's still one of mine. And every time that Satan tries to jump us or sway us from one side to another, Jesus is ever in that place of intercession where he is fighting for us and for the best for us, because he loves us. So that is the term that was used here. His power and might will be limitless. He will be the divine warrior who fights for his people. The everlasting Father refers to God. We associate this term with God when we hear the word Father. In the Old Testament, though, there was hardly ever any God was hardly ever referred to as Father. Only in the New Testament times, whenever Jesus came along, did he start being referred to as Father. So here, he's not talking. This is not making a reference to God. This is making a reference to the everlasting Father, which is Jesus Christ. He will be our everlasting Father. And it says here that he will reign with a fatherly style of leadership. You know, as a mama, I can't speak for a father, but as a mama, there's not much that my kids and now my grandkids could do that would cause me to not still do the best for them, or try to do the best for them, and to love them the best way I know how. And that's the way he loves us because we mess up a lot. I mean, I can say we on this part because I know I'm not the only one that messes up, but we mess up as a lot as Christians. And He, as our Father, loves us the way better than what we could love with our children or our grandchildren or nieces or nephews or spouses or anybody, that He leads us with that fatherly love, always wanting the best for us. You know, when the kids was little and they did something wrong, I used to whoop them. I used to get me a hickory, or I'd have the fly swat, or if I didn't have that handy, I'd use my hand, and I'd whip my kids because I didn't want them making those mistakes over and over again and growing up to make those mistakes but then be bigger. I whipped them because I loved them, but I didn't have, even though sometimes I told them that was when I had my most fun, was when I was whipping them, I didn't mean it. What I really meant was I loved them, and I wanted them to do right, so I had to whip them in order to do that. That's the fatherly love that Jesus has for us. When we stray from Him, He guides us back into the way, but sometimes He has to kind of whip us back into shape and let us know that we need to continue to follow after Him. And then the last one, the Prince of Peace, will bring God's ultimate blessing. In Isaiah 24, 2:4, Isaiah described how God would bring peace not only to His own people, and this is where it splits. You know, He's been the God of Jacob and the God of Isaac and Abraham, and now at this point, He's not talking about just coming to bring peace and make things better for the children of Israel. At this point, He's talking about the whole world, His own, but to all the nations. Since there would no longer be any wars, the armies would turn their weapons into tools for cultivating crops. So it says that He would ordain peace for His people, for all nations. So this is where it comes in as being a Savior, that Prince of Peace. When I got saved, He brought peace and order to my life. Before I was saved, it was disorderly. But when I got saved, He brought peace and order to my life. And so in that way, He does that not just for the Jews and for the Israelites, but He will do it for any person that calls on His name. Verse 7 went on to describe the results of what would happen after this great leader comes. It says, I lost it right there. Of the increase of His government and peace there shall be no end. That means that His authority would increase and it would be limitless. You know, when I read that, I thought, how wonderful to serve a God whose authority and peace and love has no bounds. It is limitless. There's what we can do in and through Jesus is limitless. The power that He gives us to fulfill the things He wants us to do if we obey Him is limitless. His love for us is limitless. His grace towards us is limitless. The peace that He will instill, it says there shall be no end. It is limitless. I always used to ask my granny about who made God, where did He come from, and who made God. And she always says God has always been and He always will be. I'm 63 years old, I still cannot wrap my mind around the fact of there's a beginning and end to everything to me. It started here, it'll end here. But for God, there was no beginning or end. He was the beginning. He is it. And there'll be no end to Him. That's exactly what it talks about there. There shall be no end to His peace. It is infinite. It is limitless. I just thought that was the best thing in the whole verse, that His authority would be limitless. And in this prophecy that Isaiah gives, He'd keep His promise to David that one of his descendants would rule over God's kingdom forever. So when God tells you something in the Old Testament, it's always fulfilled in the New Testament. There's nothing that He's left out, because he wouldn't leave things out like that. He says that he would establish his kingdom with justice and with judgment. That means he would set the standards for godly living. He lived according to those standards himself, and then teach and require them for the citizens of his kingdom. God lived a certain way. Jesus came and lived a certain way. He set up a certain established way of living, and that was always pointing to the Father, always obeying the Father, and what is the two? I give you these two commandments that are greater, is to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind and all thy soul and and love your neighbor as yourself. These two are the two greatest commandments. He established those things here on this earth. You know, sometimes people make me so mad, and I want to say ugly things to them, but God tells me I can't do that. He tells me I have to, and I wished I could say I never say anything mean to anybody, but I can't say that. But he teaches us to love our neighbors, which doesn't mean that our Christian neighbors or just our spouses or our kids, but that we're to love all people as God loved us and sent his son to die for us. So he says that's established, and that we're to live by those. He says that it's requirements for that, for his kingdom, for the citizens of his kingdom, and that he will rule with justice and judgment. A lot of these kings that came along could not rule with that justice and judgment. But it says, and none followed God's ways perfectly. Only God's Messiah would completely fulfill this prophecy. So all this was taught and spoke of from Isaiah the prophet almost 800 years before the birth of Jesus. So Luke 1:26 through 31 says, and in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God unto a city of Galilee named Nazareth. And I read, and I thought I read it in here, but I couldn't find it when I came back to it, that Nazareth was a city that was looked down upon. People didn't think much of the city of Nazareth. I can't remember if it even said why, but whatever I was reading said that it was just a city that was not held in high esteem. And this is where God chose to bring Jesus forth and have him live, was in this city of low esteem, just like the shepherds that he called. They smelled of sheep. They were, a lot of times, they didn't even own the sheep. They were just hired people that tended to those sheep, and they were of low esteem. But God still called them. It says, from the city of Galilee named Nazareth. And we do know that before, 2 lessons ago, that Galilee was Galilee of the Gentiles, because it had been taken away from the Israelites and now had a completely different nation living there. So it says, to a virgin and spouse to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David. There was the promise. He fulfilled the promise of the house of David that he made to David all those, over 800 years prior to this. And the virgin's name was Mary. And the angel came in unto her and said, Hail, thou art highly favored. The Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. And when she saw him, she was troubled at his saying, and cast in her mind what manner of salutation this should be. And the angel said unto her, Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God. And behold, thou shalt conceive in thy womb, and bring forth a son, and shall call his name Jesus. It says the Gospel of Luke records the angelic announcement regarding the birth of John the Baptist in Luke 1:5-25, followed 6 months later by the angelic announcement to a virgin in Nazareth named Mary. So I always thought when it said in the 6th month that it was the 6th month of the beginning. As a matter of fact, me and Carol Ann were talking about it this week, the 6th month being the 6th month of the year, but it's the 6 months of Elizabeth, her pregnancy. She was 6 months pregnant when this happened, and then she was told about the baby, and 6 months later, the angel came, Gabriel, and told Mary about the baby. It says that to a virgin espoused to a man whose name was Joseph, and the word espoused says the Jewish marriage customs involved an engagement stage of about a year, during the time which the couple remained sexually pure and continued to live in their parents' homes. So they were engaged, but they were, I guess that would be a better word for espoused. They were engaged, but they still lived separate. It says marriage in first century Israel consisted of 3 stages. The first was the agreement made by the parents that their children would one day be married to each other. The couple had no part in the decision. It was solely up to their parents. So that would be the first part. That was what was going on. They were agreed to marry each other. Then came the engagement time, and that was this full year, and this is where Mary was at. It was during that first full year before she was ever, I guess you would call, legally married to Joseph, that she is having this conversation with this angel. And it says the last stage included the consummation of the marriage. And that was important to know the stages back then, because that told you that she had been separated from Joseph and had not had any relations with him, to ensure that she was a virgin, that she was a virgin called by God. Let me see where I'm at. So the next portion, it says, and the angel came to her and said, "Hail, thou art highly favored." Highly favored is the root is the Greek word for grace. Highly favored. We are all highly favored that know Jesus in true salvation. It says, in effect, the angel was telling Mary that God had given her a special blessing of his grace, his undeserved favor. He says, Mary, God favors you whether you deserve it or not. You have found favor in his sight. And also that thou art blessed among women. He added to it, the Lord is with thee. He said, Mary, listen, God has blessed you whether you deserve it or not. He has blessed you and picked you out, and he's with you through this. He's going to be with you. And it says when she saw him, she was troubled. I liked the lesson said she did not slip into hysteria. Well, I would have. If an angel appeared to me and told me that I was going to have a baby, and I was sitting there thinking, but I've never been with a man, and I'm supposed to marry Joseph. How is this working out? Now, he says that God will be with me, but how do I know God's going to be with me? I would run into hysteria. My mind would go in 100 places. And it said she was troubled. It said when she saw him, she was troubled at his saying and cast in her mind. So she was thinking in her head what manner of salutation this should be. In other words, what in the world is he talking about? What is he trying to tell me here? What is going on? She didn't fall into hysteria, but she was troubled with it. But again, the angel told her, said, you found favor with God. And the angel said, fear not, Mary, for you have found favor with God. Undeserved blessings every single day. Yesterday morning, I was praying and thinking about that girl that we asked prayer for the other night. You know, they were taking her off life support yesterday. And I was thinking about my sisters and how thankful I am that yesterday wasn't a day that I had to say goodbye to my sister. And so I was just crying and talking to the Lord. And when I did, I figured, I realized that I was undeservedly blessed, undeservedly in grace. God had given me so much that I did not deserve, and He has filled my life and our lives with so much. And this is what He told that He was doing for Mary. Don't worry about it, Mary, because God's blessed you beyond measure. And it says, and behold, and thou shalt conceive in thy womb, and bring forth a son, and his name shall be called Jesus. He explained that though she was a virgin, she would become pregnant, and as a result of the divine conception, the child would be fully God and fully man, and that she was to name him Jesus. The name Jesus, it says, the Hebrew form of Jesus is Joshua, and Joshua was the person who guided the Israelites to the promised land. So it said her son would be even greater because he would free his people from the enemies of sin and death. So she knew her scriptures. She knew some of the Bible. Well, it wouldn't be the Bible back then, but the things that had been taught to her. And from those things, she gleaned that this would be a special son, and he should be called Jesus. Verse 32. Where is verse 32? He shall be great, and shall be called the Son of the Highest, and the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David, and he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there shall be no end. Gabriel said that this Jesus shall be called the Son of the Highest. Son of the Highest is a common descriptor of God in the Old Testament. So again, Gabriel's given the message that this child that is born is going to be the Son of the Highest. The Son of the Highest is God in the Old Testament. So it would all fall back into place. This child is going to be fully God, fully man, but fully God. So he is still pointing back to the fact that he is God. That's God walking with us. Gabriel described the place God would give to him as the throne of his father David. Gabriel was referring to God's promise to King David that one of his descendants would sit on his throne forever because his reign should never end. Again, he doesn't do anything in the Old Testament that he doesn't fulfill in the New Testament. And the reference to the house of Jacob was commonly used in the Old Testament for the nation of Israel. And he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever. So of Israel and of his kingdom there shall be no end. The Son of the Highest would reign forever, and his kingdom there would be of no end. That is an affirmation of the Old Testament prophecies such as Isaiah 9:6-7 and Daniel 7:13 and 14. Jesus perfectly, completely fulfills all that was written about God's Messiah in the Old Testament, and he will reign as king forever. Again, Jesus rules his kingdom now and forever. And what I love about the Bible is everything that it says, like this. I love to read about stuff, Isaiah 9:6-7, Daniel 7:13 and 14, and then you can flip it over, and then in the New Testament, some of the people that wrote it refer back to these prophecies and back to these scriptures, and it flows back and forth. It completes it and fulfills it, and it gives me assurance that these things that are written in this Bible are true, and that we can stand on top of them and not be swayed because they are true. We don't have to doubt. We don't have to fear, because we have found that blessing and that grace in unmeasured favor in God's sight. In his kingdom, he'll reign as king, and he will reign forever. So if you've got salvation, your king never dies. You never die, and your king never dies. He reigns forever. Anybody have any comments? Okay.